Welcome to Issues That Matter. My guest today is Scott Ritter, and we're going to talk about the conflict in the Middle East. So, as of like maybe Saturday or early Sunday, I heard about this. So, from your perspective, what's going on?
I mean, what's going on is we're seeing the most recent manifestation of a decades-long conflict between Israel and Hamas. Hamas is a Sunni Muslim political entity derived from the Muslim Brotherhood, an Egyptian extremist organization um, that was actually encouraged in the 1980s to become politically relevant in the Palestinian issue by Israel, which used the creation of Hamas as a means of diluting the influence of Yasser Arafat's Palestinian Liberation Organization. Um, in 2006, Israel encouraged Hamas's rise to political relevance. They went from being simply a terrorist organization that committed atrocious acts of criminality against the Israeli people to a political entity that was capable of governing the Gaza Strip, a Palestinian enclave that was part of the Palestinian Authority, but Israel was trying to, again, as I said, dilute the authority and legitimacy of the Palestinian Authority. So they helped promote Hamas, and Hamas won an election, then physically ousted the Palestinian Authority from Gaza. And ever since then, Israel's been paying the price because Hamas's charter, I believe paragraph 12 of their charter, calls for the physical elimination of Israel. I don't think Israel's ever taken Hamas seriously in that regard. They felt that Hamas was an entity that they could end up intimidating and otherwise coercing into deviating from the charter of their chartered task of the destruction of Israel to becoming a political entity whose singular focus was governance of Gaza. And I think that's ultimately what happened here, is that Israel lost sight of the real problem. The real problem, of course, people will say, well, the real problem is Hamas. And I'd say, no, the real problem is Israel. The real problem is Israeli policy that goes back 7+ decades to the creation of Israel and the Nakba, the catastrophe that the Palestinian people went through when the Israelis used force to murder, intimidate, and otherwise evict tens of thousands of Palestinians from their homes. Many of those homes were around the area we call Gaza today. And then Israel's, continuous policy of oppression, repression of the Palestinian people. And today we have a situation where the Palestinians are second-class citizens in their own homeland. And there was a time in Israel's history back in the 1990s, early mid-1990s, when Yitzhak Rabin was the prime minister, and he actively pursued a peaceful resolution to the problem, the Oslo Accords. Oslo I signed in 1993, Oslo II signed in September of 1995. But he was assassinated shortly thereafter, assassinated because of the actions and words of Benjamin Netanyahu, the current prime minister. Back in 1995, Benjamin Netanyahu, then the head of the opposition, participated in rallies where Yitzhak Rabin, a genuine hero of Israel, was called a traitor, a betrayer of Israel. They even went so far as to get conservative rabbis, radicals, to go Old Testament on Yitzhak Rabin and provide, the Israeli equivalent of a fatwa, an edict from a rabbi authorizing Yitzhak Rabin to be killed because he has betrayed the Hebrew faith. And on November 4th of of 1995, Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by a right-wing Israeli fanatic who believed he had been told by a rabbi to kill Yitzhak Rabin. This was Benjamin Netanyahu's fault. And after Rabin's death, there was no chance. Netanyahu and the political right rose to ascendancy, and ever since then, they've been promulgating policies that have been horrific towards the Palestinian people. I will never forgive the Palestinian leadership for what they have done. They've been horrifically corrupt. They have not been efficient, and they have not served the Palestinian people well. But none of the problems of Palestinian leadership justify the Israeli approach. Indeed, had the Israelis taken a more open-minded approach, a more conciliatory approach, there might have been more effective Palestinian leadership instead of the leadership they have today, which has become accustomed to being bought off by the United States and bought off by Israel to continue to allow their people to suffer, to build their political and financial empires on the suffering of the Palestinian people, which many of the people in the Palestinian Authority do to this day. So I condemn them. I also condemn Hamas. I mean, when I was in Israel in the 1990s, almost every trip I took to Israel, there was a Hamas terrorist event, sometimes within 100 meters of where I was, sometimes within a few blocks, but always resulting in the deaths of innocent Israeli civilians. There's no justification for Hamas's actions. They were horrific, and they are horrific to this day. Any targeting, deliberate targeting of civilians, whether it's done by Hamas or done by the Israeli military, is a contemptuous and action that must be condemned by all parties involved. But again, having said that, what happened is that Hamas acted out on, I mean, you're going to be what you are. Hamas is a terrorist organization whose charter calls for the physical destruction of Israel. Why anybody believes Hamas will behave anything other than what they are is beyond me. And Hamas acted out on their charter. They carried out a very well-planned assault by highly trained professional people. I think when we use the term terrorist, which may make us feel good, what we end up doing is somehow diminishing the lethality of the enemy that we're up against. These are soldiers of Hamas who are very well trained, very well organized, very well equipped, and very deadly. The initial phase of their attack took out the Israeli Defense Forces positions. This was a military on military engagement that Hamas won decisively. Later on, Hamas moved into military installations, including the camp, the headquarters of the Gaza division, where they slaughtered Israeli soldiers. One has to ask the question, why were the Israeli soldiers in the position to be slaughtered? Why weren't they prepared for this? They are, after all, professional soldiers in an ostensible combat zone, but they were caught sleeping. So too were the civilians, the citizens of Israel that these soldiers were supposed to be protecting. Thousands of them in the kibbutzes that surrounded Gaza, thousands of them in the towns and villages and cities that surrounded Gaza. Hamas surged into these areas and committed atrocities, the likes of which can never be excused. While many of these atrocities have turned out to be exaggerated, for instance, right now there's a story going around about 40 beheaded children. There's no evidence that took place, none whatsoever. There's also a lot of talk about the raping of women. If anybody knows anything about Islamic fundamentalists, the raping of women is the last thing that they would be engaged in. But what they did do is kill in a very wanton fashion hundreds of unarmed civilians. That's murder, and it should be condemned and must be condemned. But they did this for a reason. I mean, there's a methodology behind their terror, and the goal was to enrage Israel. I mean, everything that Israel's doing right now is what Hamas wanted them to do, up to and including the surrounding of Gaza, the cutting off of energy supplies, water supplies, and the bombing of Gaza, this ongoing war crime being perpetrated by Israel against the civilians of Gaza, the Palestinian civilians, is planned by Hamas for a reason. And the reason is they want to turn the tables. They committed horrific crimes early on, And what they're doing now is getting Israel to commit even more horrific crimes. And what Israel is going to do is lose the support of the rest of the world, which is what Hamas wants. What Hamas will want the rest of the world to start demanding that Israel stop their bombing. And the key to that is Hamas has achieved a victory unlike any achieved by Hamas before. The physical destruction of the Israeli armed forces, of the embarrassment of Israel. And if Hamas can survive the Israeli retaliation, then Hamas emerges as the victor, as an entity that Israel and the world will have to deal with. Right now, Israel's saying they're going to eliminate Hamas, but they're not. How do you eliminate Hamas when they're hiding amongst more than 2 million people in one of the most urbanized environments? And all Israel is doing is blowing up buildings. People need to study the Battle of Stalingrad, need to study the battles of Monte Cassino in Italy in 1944, need to study the most recent battles at Mariupol and Bakhmut in Ukraine to understand how stupid it is to blow up a city, allow an enemy to dig into the rubble, and then try to go and remove. And remember, Hamas isn't above ground. They're below ground. They're not being harmed, at least they're not in a meaningful fashion, by this bombing. Israel is harming innocent Palestinian civilians. But this is what Hamas intended to do. Israel had believed that they had successfully bribed Hamas into becoming an entity focused on the government, the governance of the Palestinians of Gaza. And indeed, this belief by Israel blinded them to the overwhelming amount of data that was coming in showing that Hamas was preparing to carry out such an attack. Hamas has proven Israel to be wrong, and now Israel is going to have to learn how to deal with Hamas in a post-conflict environment. Because I do believe Hamas will fight the Israeli army to a standstill. There will be a termination of this conflict that has Hamas not only surviving but emerging stronger than they were when they came in.
Let me ask you this question. You know, I'm no expert on the Middle East, but I do know that over the years, Israel has waged a violent attack on the Palestinians. So my take, and maybe I'm wrong, is, well, it's time to get even. Am I correct?
Well, one crime does not justify the other. I mean, from the standpoint of Hamas, it doesn't matter. Hamas exists for the purpose of destroying Israel. So to sit there and point at Israeli atrocities and say that this justified Hamas, no, that means that Hamas wouldn't have done what they did had Israel not done what they did. Israel's crimes are against the Palestinian people. The vast majority of Israel's crimes take place on a regular basis in the West Bank, which is not governed by Hamas, where the Palestinian Authority is. The murder of Palestinian children, the murder of Palestinian women, the murder of unarmed Palestinian men whose only crime is trying to live their lives. We have right here in the United States a class of people, I call them the Brooklyn Jews. Now, I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but I'm going to say it. These are people who can't hack it in life in America. They're pathetic losers who realize that their only chance for relevance is to fly to Israel and steal the homes of Palestinians. And so these losers, these Brooklyn Jews, fly to Israel, and then they become part of a settlement campaign that goes in and forces Palestinians out of their homes and takes them over. And if the Palestinians resist, the settlers shoot them, or they get the Israeli police to shoot them, or they get the Israeli army to shoot them. So now, if the Palestinian people of the West Bank were rising up and slaughtering the Israeli settlers, I would agree with you. An eye for an eye, Old Testament. It's not a good thing, but at least you can understand it. That's not what's happening. If the Palestinian people of Gaza were rising up, surging out, a crowd of angry, enraged people ripping the Jewish settlers apart limb by limb, you could say, well, the Israelis had it coming because cause and effect. But that's not what's happening. The Palestinian people are by and large peaceful. They are suffering egregious harm. And while they are angry, they aren't the ones perpetrating these violence. The people carrying this out, again, the most recent attack were done by hardcore Hamas fighters, people who have bought into the Muslim Brotherhood's, very um, strict interpretation of Islam, people who have taken an oath to a charter that calls for the destruction of Israel. This isn't what the Palestinian people are doing. But once again, it's the Palestinian people that are paying the heaviest price. Those children who are dying in Gaza today because Israeli pilots flying American airplanes, dropping American bombs, are slaughtering them by the hundreds. Those are innocents. They have nothing to do with this, but they're the ones paying the price. The Hamas fighters, they're underground in a bunker, living, waiting for the moment that the Israeli army crosses into Gaza so they can rise up from a tunnel behind them and kill them, slaughter them like lambs. That's what Hamas is waiting for, but not the Palestinian people. They don't want this. They didn't ask for this. All they want to do is live in their own land. They didn't ask to be confined in an open air concentration camp. Some people call it an open air prison, but it's not a prison. A prison is where you put convicts, people who have committed crimes. The Palestinian people are innocent. They have not committed any crimes. Their only crime, apparently, in the eyes of the Israelis, is to have been born. That is not a crime. They deserve to live normal lives. They don't deserve to be cooped up. They deserve the right of return. They should be allowed to go back to the land, to the villages where their parents, their grandparents lived before they were forcefully evicted by the Israelis in 1948. That's what should be happening, but it's not happening. And now innocent Israelis are paying the price. But again, let's put it this way. I don't believe any civilian should be killed. It's a war crime. It shouldn't happen.
Right.
I'm tired of talking about innocent Israelis. Let me give you an example. In the town of Sderot, north of Gaza, the Hamas fighters came in and they perpetrated crimes. They kicked down the doors and they killed the Israeli civilians, unarmed civilians who lived there. And people go, well, these innocent Israelis. Well, let me remind people that in 2014, these same innocent Israeli citizens were sitting up on a hill outside of Sderot while the Israeli Air Force bombed Gaza, killing hundreds of innocent Palestinians. And as the Israeli Air Force bombed them, as the explosions went off, these people were eating a barbecue and cheering. And when asked about this by the media, they said that the Palestinians aren't humans, they're animals. They deserve everything they're getting. There's nothing innocent about that. Those citizens of Sderot and those people who live around Gaza know damn well what's going on, just like the Germans that live next to the concentration camps that were disposing of Jewish bodies in crematorium, and they'd wipe off falling ash from their shoulder and march on as if nothing happened. These people allowed this open air concentration camp to exist for decades. They cheered as the Israeli Air Force dropped bombs on those people, those humans that lived just a few miles away from them, cheering while they were slaughtered. And you want me to say they're innocent? Not on your life. They shouldn't have been killed. They're civilians. Their death is a crime. And hopefully there will be justice for this. But there's nothing.
So what's the link between Hamas and the Palestinians? Spell that out for us.
Well, Hamas is a Palestinian organization.
Okay.
So, link, they are from the Palestinian people. They are a certain element within the Palestinian people that, again, was empowered by Israel in the 1980s. There were Palestinians. And again, you got to study the history of this. Gaza is right next to Egypt. There's a definite linkage between Egypt and Gaza. Many of the Palestinians that lived in Gaza were educated in Egypt and were influenced by Egyptian politics and and religious struggles in Egypt. Egypt had, and is continuing to fight a long, hard war against the Muslim Brotherhood, which has espoused violence as a means of overthrowing the Egyptian government. This Muslim Brotherhood entity found a root in Gaza amongst the Palestinian population. It should have been rooted out and destroyed. That's what normally you'd want to do against this hate spewing entity. But instead, Israel said, no, 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 no. We're going to empower Hamas and create some political gravity around them so they can be counter to Yasser Arafat's Fatah and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. So Israel breathed life to these guys. Israel kept them functioning. And then Israel is today paying the price. And remember, again, in 2006, it was Israel that facilitated Hamas's political rise to power, elevating them from being a simple terrorist organization to being a government entity that Israel was hoping would somehow bring peace and stability to the Gaza region. No, you don't ask a lifetime jewel thief to suddenly, run the cashier desk at a Tiffany's jewelry store. They're going to steal. Hamas, if you give them the ability, they're going to commit horrific crimes, and they did. They just did.
Okay. Why now? Why now?
Why not now? What's so special about now, Cynthia? What's special about today? And I mean, let's erase the hubris of the West. We are the most important people in the world. Don't you know, you stupid, ignorant Palestinians, that Ukraine is the number one problem in the world today? We are singularly focused on Ukraine. How dare you manifest your issues today to interfere with our singular focus on bringing Russia down in Ukraine? The Palestinian people don't care. They are suffering. Their suffering goes on and on and on, and we are blind to it. We are blind to it. The only good thing that's coming out of this Hamas crime, and it is a crime, is maybe the West will now wake up and say, whoa, how did this happen? How do we prevent this from happening again? But it's not going to be about how do we work with Hamas, although unfortunately, if Hamas wins, and it looks like they will win, we're going to have to deal with Hamas. But we should start talking about how do we solve? How do you solve the problem of Hamas? You take away their political legitimacy in the eyes of the Palestinian people. How do you do that? By empowering the Palestinian people to live as human beings on land that belongs to them. But that's not what we do. We've ignored them. We've ignored them. We just continue to ignore them on a daily basis. We don't care about them. They don't exist. When a Palestinian child dies of a disease, or when a mother is unable to have a job, or whatever problems befall them, because it is a 2 million person ghetto there in Gaza. It's a ghetto run by slumlords, and the ultimate slumlord is Israel, where you have Israelis determining whether or not a handful of Gazan citizens will be allowed to leave the concentration camp and get a minimum wage job in Israel so that there is the appearance of economic prosperity. That's what's going on. That's not how the world lives. Imagine if we put the Jews in a concentration camp and treated them the way that they are treating the Palestinians. There would be a hue and outcry like you wouldn't believe, as there should be. But the double standard there is unreal. Unreal. We haven't been thinking about the Palestinian people. Well, now, guess what? Are you listening to us now? Are you listening to the Palestinian people? You're damn right the world is. And I'm sorry it took the deaths of so many Israeli citizens. Again, I'm not going to use the word innocent except children. But if you lived in Israel and you, as an adult, and you've tolerated the government that continues to perpetrate these ongoing crimes against the Palestinians, if you haven't spent your ever waking moment demonstrating in the streets saying, not my Israel, not my government, not me, then you're not innocent. Shouldn't have been killed, but you're not innocent. Israel is not the innocent party here. Israel is not the victim. Israel is the victimizer, and they've been victimizing the Palestinian people for decades, but we pretend it isn't happening. It's happening, Cynthia. Why now? When's a good time for people to stand up and defend their rights? When is the right time to do it? It's not about convenience to the West. It's about people unable, unwilling to continue to be treated in this fashion. And it's not the Palestinian people that did this, but it's Hamas feeding off of the anger, feeding off of the righteous outrage against Israel for what they do every day. Israel empowered. Israel created Hamas. Israel empowered Hamas. And now Israel is paying the price for its mistakes.
Over the years, you never see much about in the media in this country. You never see the atrocities that are perpetrated on the Palestinians. But as soon as the Jewish people are in some way harmed, it's all over the news. It's like a double standard?
Look, I blame every Jewish synagogue in America that claims to have some sort of connectivity with Israel. You're to blame. You're to blame because you're the ones who travel over to Israel. You're the ones who see firsthand what's going on. Don't tell me you don't, because I've been to Israel. I've seen it. I know what's going on. I know about the walls. I know about the apartheid system. I know what you say in cafes about the Palestinians. I know because I've been there. You say you don't do it, you're a liar. And if you're an American Jew who goes to Israel and comes back to America, then everything is milk and honey in the land of Moses. You're a hypocrite. You're a liar. You're the problem. We need to start being honest and have an honest discussion about this. All right. This is if Israel in if the American Jewish population that has links to Israel doesn't want to see the rise of anti-Semitism, then they have to take responsibility for what they're doing. Anti-Semitism is something that comes from ignorance. I'll be the first one to admit that. But that ignorance is derived from fear, and that fear is derived from a lack of understanding what's going on. Right now, when people look at the situation in Israel, they're going to blame American Jews for this. People are going to start blaming American Jews. There will be an anti-Semitic backlash. The best way to respond to this is to be honest about what's going on in Israel and then try and come up with a viable solution to it. But if you just sit back and you pretend it's not happening and you facilitate the continued slaughter and imprisonment of the Palestinian people, then you're guilty of the very things that the anti-Semites are accusing you of being guilty of. So I blame every synagogue. I blame every synagogue in Albany. And I'll tell you right now, if you're a member of the synagogue and you take umbrage of this, let's have a discussion. Let's have a debate. Let's have a dialogue. Let's do it in public. Let's do it in front of your entire congregation. Let's bring in a Christian congregation. Let's bring in a Muslim congregation. Let's just lay it out on the table, guys. And I will rip you apart because you can't defend what Israel's been doing. You cannot defend. And if your defense is God's will, because it is God's land and we are God's chosen people, go to hell. That's no defense at all. That doesn't justify any of the crimes you've done. We don't live in a religious la-la land. We live in reality where humans are treated as humans. And if you're going to say that the Jews are God's selected people and that justifies what's happening to the Palestinians, then get the hell out of my country. Go live in Israel and pay the consequences of that kind of perverted thinking. In America, we believe that all men are created equal. All men, that means women too. Everybody is created equal. And if you're going to live in America, you better damn well embrace American values. And that means everybody is equal, that we don't put one religion above the other. And yet that's what American Jews do, and that's what Israel does. It's the Jewish homeland. And they basically say that everybody else is a second-class citizen. Now, there are some enlightened Israeli citizens out there who disagree with that or are looking for a way to peacefully coexist, but they've been overwhelmed by this new generation of fanatics in Israel. Fanatics. And many of them reside here in America, and many of them are voted into office in Congress. And this hatred Palestinians percolates and is I'm missing a word here. I'm so angry right now. I've scrambled my brain, but I'm furious about this. And I'll tell you the root of my fury, if you want an honest thing. I used to be one of these Gentiles, one of these Goyim, who would stand up and say, I stand with Israel. I used to be a friend of Israel. Spent a lot of time in Israel in 1994 to 1998. I traveled there frequently for lengthy periods of time, working in a very close relationship with Israeli intelligence to solve the problem of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. And as I said, I was there when Hamas was blowing people up. I learned to hate Hamas and such. But I also recognize the Israelis as wonderful people. I mean, what a beautiful country. What a beautiful country with a beautiful people. I mean, the Israeli people are genuinely wonderful people with a love of life. They have family values. There's not, when you look at them in just in an objective fashion, you're saying, my God, these are good people. I want to be with them. I want to be their friends. and I will stand by them and protect them as they need to be protected. And I remind people that during the Gulf War, I was one of those people who was out there protecting Israel, putting my life on the line to stop Iraqi Scud missiles from being fired against Israel. Now, I wasn't doing it to, because of Israel. I was doing it because I'm an American and we didn't want Israel to get into the war. But the bottom line is, I did more to save Israel than most I will tell you that 99.99% of American Jews out there have ever done for Israel. So, people are like, oh, Scott, you're anti-Semitic. Screw you. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm an American. And that means I believe in everybody. But there was a time when I said, Israel is my friend. I am the friend of Israel. But that friendship was born in the time of Yitzhak Rabin, a warrior who believed in peace, a man who was willing to put it all on the table to try and resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And then he was murdered by a right-wing fanatic operating under, if not the direct orders, at least influenced by Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the prime minister of Israel today, who continues to be voted into office by the Israeli nation. If you're going to call yourself a democracy, then you have to be held accountable for what you do as a democracy, and you continue to empower Benjamin Netanyahu to go out there and commit horrific crimes against the Palestinian people. I no longer stand with Israel, and I will never stand with Israel so long as Israel continues to promote these policies that treat the Palestinians as second-class citizens, as subhumans, as animals, to quote the Israeli Minister of Defense. Again, for every Jewish congregation out there, have you risen up and condemned this? I mean, are you writing letters to the Times Union right now as we speak? Are you calling Alan Shartok at WAMC and saying, Alan, you need to condemn the words of the Minister of Defense of Israel, who called Palestinians animals and said they should die? Not a single damn voice. Not a peep from the American Israeli community, the American Jewish community. Not a peep, which tells you everything you need to know about them. Everything. And if you're upset with me, prove me wrong. Pick up the phone, make a call. Not going, because you know who you are. You know what you are. And you're the reason why this horrific event took place.
Now, we're talking about America. How is the rest of the world viewing this?
Well, I don't know. I'm here in America. I mean, I can only, I can say, what I've read. I can say what I've look. Generally speaking, again, another thing I'm going to say that people can say, "Oh, you're anti," but generally speaking, the mainstream media is very sympathetic to Israel, especially in Western European countries, and so the coverage is going to be unabashedly pro-Israeli. Now, if you move away from there, you get into the Middle East, you'll get coverage that is more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. You'll get in some places coverage that's sympathetic to the Hamas cause. You've seen, but most people who, entities such as, Turkey's President Erdogan, he's speaking out in defense of the Palestinian people. There's very few nations that have come out and said, we support what Hamas has done, because frankly speaking, the slaughter of civilians, it can't be condoned. It can't be encouraged. It has to be condemned. And what Hamas did is contemptuous, and it must be condemned. But most people are standing up, however, for the Palestinian people. And everybody recognizes that Hamas's actions were set in motion by Israel's policy against the Palestinian people. And so I think it depends where you are in the world, but there's a large camp outside of America and European West that is speaking out in support of the Palestinian people today. And there are some voices in America and in Europe that are starting to do the same thing. The tragedy is that there's going to be a lot of dead Palestinians before this is over. The only silver lining in that extraordinarily dark cloud is that the suffering of the Palestinian people will hopefully trigger a human response in the hearts of people around the world to finally say there must be a solution, and to start holding Israel accountable for what they have done to create the conditions for this horror that's transpiring in front of us.
President Biden spoke yesterday, and he's getting all kinds of accolades and how good he was and how wonderful the speech was. Let me ask you this question. Recently, Zelensky walked away from Congress empty-handed. What's the link between Zelensky and what's going on today, if any?
In Israel,
Yeah.
nothing. There's no link whatsoever. It's a totally separate event. There's no linkage
Okay.
whatsoever.
But Biden's giving them arms, giving Israel arms, giving them weapons and stuff. So the Congress didn't want to give more aid to the Ukraine. So instead of fighting in Ukraine or giving them arms, now the scenery has changed. So the arms dealers can give it to Russia. You think I'm way off? I'm sorry, to
Israel.
Israel. Do you think I'm really far off based on this one?
I don't think there's any connection whatsoever. I mean, there's consequential connectivity, I guess, if you want to say, maybe we don't have all the arms that we would otherwise give Israel because of Ukraine. You could make that connection. But the bottom line is there's not any debate there's not any debate about supporting Israel. None. Blind support. Blind support. And so we're going to give Israel everything they need. They haven't specified it yet, but I believe that the artillery ammunition that we're now providing to Israel is coming from our wartime stocks. Our wartime stocks, meaning that if we ever had to go hooking and jabbing against Iran, or we had to do fire missions in support of our military presence in Iraq and Syria, we're going to be running a deficit of ammunition because we're now giving it to Israel because we took 300,000 rounds out of pre-positioned stock that existed in Israel and sent it to Ukraine. There's connectivity there, but there's no debate about supporting Israel, none whatsoever. We will give Israel the shirt off our back, literally, if that's what's needed for this.
Okay. So do you think this is going to be a protracted war?
I think it's going to go on longer than it should. Every day that it happens, hundreds and eventually we're going to be seeing thousands of Palestinian civilians are going to be killed each day, innocent people. We're probably going to see epidemics, cholera, dysentery, ravage the Palestinian people because they don't have access to water, they don't have access to healthcare, food, sanitation's going down, sewage is already piling up. It's going to go medieval, and the people are going to suffer there. We are empowering Israel to commit war crimes on a daily basis. Instead of stopping, we could stop this war right now, today, literally right now. This war could be stopped. All President Biden has to do is call up Benjamin Netanyahu and say, not one more penny will ever cross the threshold of America into Israeli coffers if you continue to do this. Stop. Not one more bomb. The next bomb that hits is the last bomb we will ever provide you. We're done with you. But that won't happen. We are, look, Benjamin Netanyahu bragged, and again, this is where I'm going to get in trouble, but we got to be honest here. He bragged about how he bought the American Congress. He said, I bought them all. I paid them all. And he does it indirectly through AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. I used to work in the vicinity of AIPAC. I never worked with them, but they would, they bird dogged me when I was going through Congress back in the early 2000s trying to stop a war with Iraq. I'd go knock on the door of a senator and congressman, have my meeting, and right behind me came in the AIPAC crowd to remind them who pays for their damn reelection. Scott Ritter doesn't write those checks, they would tell him. We do. They own Congress. They've bought Congress. They bought the media. They own it. They're controlling every aspect of this. This is why this conversation won't appear on any mainstream media outlet. Because immediately the second it does, it'll be called anti-Semitic. There's nothing anti-Semitic about this. It's just the hard truth. And the hard truth is that we have allowed Israel to be hijacked by a radical nationalists, Jewish nationalists, who have imposed literally, I thought the day of the Aryans, Ubermensch was over. I thought we said with Adolf Hitler, there's no such thing as the master race. But in Israel, they believe that the Jews are the master race. Not all of them, but the governing authorities believe in the supremacy of the Jew on Israeli soil. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. all men are created equal. And if you're an American and you don't believe that, get the hell out of America. Go live with somewhere else. But don't sit here and tell me you're an American, but you say, yes, but in Israel, Jew is supreme. No. There should be a homeland for the Jewish people. I don't disagree with that at all. But there should be a homeland for the Palestinian people too. And if that homeland happens to be the same piece of earth, then they have to figure out how to cohabitate peacefully. They haven't figured that one out yet.
They haven't done that in 75 years.
No,
right?
they haven't. They don't, and the reason why is because of Israel, because of the birth of Israel, the way Israel was born. David Ben-Gurion, again, this is one of those facts that the Jewish Zionists don't like to hear. David Ben-Gurion's on record as saying, if I were a Palestinian Arab, I would hate Israel. I wouldn't do business with Israel because Israel stole my home. Israel lied to us. Israel murdered us. Israel did horrible things. So if I was a Palestinian, I'd be against Israel. They would be my enemy. Very honest statement. He also said that Israel is God's gift to the Jewish people. So he believed that everything he did was justified as a Jew, but at least he was honest, understanding that perceived by the Palestinians, everything he did was a crime because it was a
Mm-hmm. So this is going to be an ongoing issue, and I hope to have you back on to talk about this. But let me ask you this, because something else sprung up in the world. Where does this place your initiative for the movie and your new book?
Oh no, this issue, as bad as it is right now, will be over. This isn't going on forever. Russophobia is going on forever. This issue has, I mean, you can spin scenarios where Israel ends up dropping nuclear weapons on Iran and we get an energy crisis and all that, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to it's going to end in Gaza when the world gets tired of looking at dead Palestinian babies. Frankly, that's going to be it. One day, the world's going to wake up and say, we've just seen too many dead Palestinian babies pulled out of the rubble or starving or dying of dysentery on the road, and they're going to say stop to this conflict. And the irony is, the logic they're using to stop it applies today. You could save, I'm just saying, we could save tens of thousands of Palestinian lives right now by just recognizing that this is futile, what's happening right now. Hamas did what they did, and Hamas is going to survive this Israeli backlash. It is a pipe dream to think that the Israeli army is going to somehow go into Gaza and eliminate Hamas. It isn't going to happen. So why not just say, bring an end to this now, save so many lives, and then do what needs to be done? Because what needs to be done is to empower the Palestinian people. I'm sorry, Israel, the day of Israeli exceptionalism is over. You ain't exceptional anymore. You've been exposed as what you are, a bunch of land stealing, murderous, psychopathic Zionists. And if you want to be something different, then behave as something different. Look for a two-state solution. Look for a one-state solution. But look for a solution that has Jews and Arabs, Jews and Muslims, Jews and Christians all living together in harmony, because they can. But this is going to happen sometime. This isn't going to go on till the New Year's. The Russian problem is here forever. So I'm not losing the ball on this one. I know, that the movie's going to get made. I'm going to be going back to Russia to continue this work. It's just, right now, this is a hot topic. It's out there. I have a background in relationships with Israel, with the Arab world, and so my point of view is relevant. But so too is my point of view about Russia, and I will continue to be doing that work.
Yeah, we will talk again. Needless to say, our conversations are always really top notch. So you've been listening to Scott Ritter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. So if you like this program, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Scott, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a wonderful day.